Welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. Greetings. My guest for this program is someone who has, depending on your point of view, I suppose, taken on a legendary status in the history of UFOs. For 10 years, he was in danger of extradition to the United States for allegedly hacking into the databases of, I believe it was supposed to be 97 U.S. military and NASA computers, including U.S. Space Command. And what was this mischievous hacker looking for? Evidence of UFOs and free energy technologies. I am, of course, referring to Gary McKinnon, a citizen of the UK, who was finally, in 2012, blocked from extradition by the UK government and has been able, I'm hoping, to live life free from the fear of incarceration by the US government. Gary, welcome to the Richard Dolan Show.
Hi, Richard. It's quite amazing hearing those words. I've been a long time admirer of yours and watched hours and hours of footage of your talks and interviews and lectures, etc. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm kind of nervous because I don't do these things very often. And,
well, thank you very much. Gary, it's really my honor to have you on. So I just want to say that first. And secondly, I was thinking about your case, and it's like 20 years almost since all of this began. It's really quite amazing. And I think that there's probably a whole new generation of people following the UFO field who really may not know or appreciate the significance of your story. So I feel every now and then it's really important to talk about it. And you haven't done that many interviews lately. So I'm hoping that we take this as a really good opportunity for you to introduce just what it was that you did and what makes what you did so significant for a lot of people who incredibly may not know much about your story.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add one other thing, if I may.
Of course.
If people go to look for you on Wikipedia, which I'm sure some people will, I just want to point out that Wikipedia, as per usual with this subject, did an absolutely terrible job in describing your story. I don't know if you've looked at your Wikipedia article at all, but it's par for the course with them. And they're one thing that they will never do is ever spend any time on whatever it is that you've found in your supposed hacking, and which, by the way, I don't think was really hacking. You can maybe clarify that, of the U.S. defense system. But their treatment of you, it's par for the course with the UFO subject, but they did a bad job with you as well.
Well, didn't I think the WikiLeaks, the wiki founder said that it's essentially broken now.
Oh, that Wikipedia is broken.
Yeah, some years ago. Yeah, the founder said that.
Well, that makes sense. I didn't hear that, but I believe it.
Because of all so many people, so many contributors, probably a lack of organization since it's unpaid work, it's done for the love of what it could be, I guess.
Well, in my own view, I didn't want to get too sidetracked here, but it just seems like there's definitely agenda-driven politics in certain elements of Wikipedia. Anything that deals with what they would consider the fringe, they come down so heavy-handed, ham-fisted, over the top. It's almost comical how bad that they are. And the way that they handled your case, I think, is just no exception. They've really focused on the politics, but not at all on the content of what you were looking for. So your story 20 years ago, you were in London and looking for UFOs in the U.S. military database. What were you doing?
Yeah, it was. I was arrested in 2002, so 17 years ago. In fact, possibly even to this day. I know it was mid-March. I've got a feeling it may be the 12th. But I've been a long time enthusiast about UFOs. I moved to London when I was 7, or about 6.5, with my stepfather, my mother. And my stepdad was really into science fiction. And so I got into science fiction and then UFOs and the standard sort of trajectory for anyone with those sort of interests, I guess. And I joined BUFORA, the British UFO Research Association, when I was about 12. And if I remember rightly, that just involved like a monthly newsletter, sort of magazine type thing. No internet in those days. And when I was about 12 or 13, I'm pretty sure it was under 14 anyway. I saw my first and last actual sighting of an unidentified flying object, light in the sky that I couldn't explain. And I was looking from an upstairs window, and this light went across from almost vertical to the horizon in about, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds. It was a pretty orangey red, but it was moving in Brownian motion in this arc, so it wasn't a clean arc. Literally, like, what the hell can move like that with such speed and left and right, but just over the horizon, and that was it. So that's my only ever sighting. But yeah, time goes on, and you grow up, and you learn things, and the darker side of the politics surrounding UFOs. I learned a lot more about that, and that's very frustrating because, well, your famous legendary phrase now, the breakaway civilization, that everyone uses now. I heard Mr. Alex Jones using it the other day. You just imagine that some group of people has this technology somewhere. There's so much evidence for it. But
well, I'm fascinated by the fact that you were subscribing to the Bufora publication at age 12. So, and I think a lot of people realize how this subject can be obsessive. People become involved with it, and you just dive more and deeper into it. So by the late 90s, obviously we have the early version of the internet, and you, I think, like a lot of people, were trying to use the internet to learn everything that you could about UFOs, but I think you were able to go a bit farther than many other people. And can you just describe, because here's the thing, after you were arrested and your case became very widely publicized, not just within the UFO field, your case was publicized around the world. And the Pentagon, this is in the immediate post 9/11 period, when in the United States, I could tell you, this country was out of control culturally, in terms of ramping up the patriotism and the fear and the terrorism, and all of that was beyond anything that any American who grew up prior to 9/11 had not experienced this, maybe except the World War II generation, perhaps. So this was a new thing. So in all of that, the Pentagon says that you perpetrated the biggest military computer hack of all time and cost them all of this ridiculous amount of money, which I actually never really found credible, but they said, well, you knocked a couple of things offline and you deleted files, whatever. But what actually did you do? Like, you really didn't hack, as far as I could tell. You were looking for unguarded sites within the Pentagon. Isn't that so?
Yeah, not just the Pentagon, just a couple of networks. I think one was the Navy. Yeah, it was more like going fishing, really, because I knew they used Windows. Windows is just ubiquitous amongst the military, as it is over here as well these days. And I knew Windows was it's a very weak operating system. It's not what the military should use. Well, you can lock it down, to be fair. All the tools for locking it down are in there, but it's a laborious job. So all I did was I wrote a script in a scripting language called Perl, Program Extracting and Reporting Language. And this script just scanned every IP on a subnet. So it might have been 255 or 512 or however many. And tested the administrator password, which is the count on the local machine, which has full control of the local machine, to see if it was either blank or just password. I didn't even run like a big dictionary attack, just check for those two states. I
see.
Yeah, and so typically, say you scanned 50,000 machines, 5,000 of those might have blank passwords, and 500 of those, 5,000 of those might talk to you. So you could get what was called inter-process communication, and 500 of those will have blank passwords, so you could then log on and have a look on the network.
So you were looking for low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you found. So you entered the I guess, is it the websites? Were they really called websites, or just the databases, I suppose?
They're just Windows computers and networks.
Right.
Sometimes you might find yourself on a logistics officer's machine, or it might be an administration officer's machine. You didn't really know until you were there.
Well, you were looking for UFO information, and that's what you have always said, and also evidence for free energy cover up and the like. So you've mentioned a number of times that you found a few things, and were you doing this in 2000 or 2001, right?
For about a year, from late 2000 to late 2001.
Yeah. And you found a few things. You found something known as Solar Warden. I hope that you can.
No,
you didn't.
No, there's so much disinformation about
Thank
me.
you for clarifying that. Solar Warden is connected with you. You know what it is? It's interesting. In the early years, I was always looking into you, and I never saw a Solar Warden connection. I just saw fleet-to-fleet transfers and a few other things, non-terrestrial officers and so forth. I didn't see Solar Warden, and then as years went by, I continually heard Solar Warden connected with your name.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's clarify all of that. So what did you find, and then how did Solar Warden get attached to you?
It was an Excel spreadsheet, and there was a non-terrestrial officers list, and I can't remember the file name of the spreadsheet, but the heading on the column was non-terrestrial officers. And I looked it up at the time, and it was nowhere, absolutely nowhere, in that exact phrase, the quotation marks in the Google search.
Indeed.
If you search for it now, all you find is references to me finding it. But obviously, it wasn't aliens. It wasn't, little green men. I took it to just mean there must be evidence of an off-Earth fleet. If you have non-terrestrial officers, you must have spaceships that are based in maybe in geostationary orbits. Who knows?
Right, exactly. And indeed, isn't this, what do you think today about that phrase? Do you think that still can refer to off-planet officers, or do you have a different opinion about that?
I think because I found it on, if I remember rightly, what was a Navy machine, that it probably pertains to human soldiers or human personnel.
Right, non-terrestrial, but off-planet or on?
Yeah, but off-planet. I mean, that's all that means, isn't it? Is that they're not
exactly
in the locale of the Earth. So they could be orbiting, there could be Mars, there could be the Moon. Who knows? But.
Yeah, a secret space program, though. Like you still believe, I think, as I do, frankly, that non-terrestrial officers would refer to human beings, officers who are off-world in some capacity.
Yeah.
And in a classified way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you found that, was that in the U.S. Space Command website, or was that in some other, or not website, excuse me, was it in U.S. Space Command, or was it in some other department of the military or the Navy?
I'm not sure. I think it was the Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what else did you find? I believe you saw something as well on your screen, but you didn't have the ability to take a screenshot, I think it was.
Yeah, that was NASA Johnson Space Center. And that was due to the testimony of Donna Hare, the disclosure project witness.
For people who don't know, Donna Hare worked as I think for Philco Ford, which was a NASA subcontractor in the early 70s. And she has had a lot to say about what she learned through her NASA colleagues about a secret space program. And she's made some very, very forthright statements about NASA's engagement with UFOs and astronauts encountering UFOs on their missions and so forth. So you're referring to her.
Yep, and she had secret clearance in the area where she worked, bearing in mind that some of these setups, there are lots of open areas near each other, but they'll all have different clearances. You don't necessarily have locked doors, apparently. And she's at work one day and she wanders into another area with a colleague, to another colleague who's got an electronic airbrushing kit, basically, for the high resolution satellite imaging. And he says, Donna, look at this. Tell me what you think. And he shows her like a white disc above the terrain. And the shadow of this white disc on the terrain. And she didn't notice the shadow at first. And she says, well, being a photographic, she was a launch mission specialist, right? Launch photographic slides and stuff. And she didn't notice the shadow at first. She said, oh, it could be a blob of the emulsion or something. He said, yeah, but look at the shadow. And it was quite clearly, she said, you see after that it's a disc-shaped craft. The shadow was shaped over the rocks and the trees and the terrain. And in the retelling of the story, she mentioned which space center it was at, which was Johnson, and which building it was in, which was Building 8.
Oh.
And yeah, I was already on Johnson with the blank password scanning method.
Yes.
And I thought, crikey, Building 8, I've got to get onto this. And when you're on there, it's mostly done through a command console at first when you're setting up your links. And I did, oh crikey, I forget the command now. You can run a command in a Windows box that shows you a list of all the machines on the network plus their comment fields. And system administrators, network administrators use these comment fields for serial numbers, for auditing, all sorts of handy information. And luckily, the NASA administrators were really on their job, and you knew which building each machine was in, the serial number, etc. So I stripped out all the Building 8 machines, and then did a blank password scan on those. And I think only 10 or so had blank passwords.
So based on a very good lead from Donna Hare from something from years and years ago, it sounds like you were able to pinpoint the destination of what you were looking for and to try to confirm any kind of information that she had talked about back in the 70s. That's what it sounds like. So what happened?
So I think, there were 8 to 10 blank password machines. And so you run your scan, they come back, you log on to each one, you look individually. And all of these were very, because I was used to, whatever person earlier on, they've got desktops with folders and reminders and all sorts of shortcuts. These machines had nothing on it but a couple of folders and a couple of shortcuts. And but these files were massive. They had folders called either sort of raw and filtered or processed and unprocessed. And that was my first sign. What Donna said is absolutely true. This is almost exactly how she described it. And then I got in there. They're in a NASA proprietary format, which was probably the special NASA photo viewer, which has gone through many incarnations. I can't remember the name of it now. And they were typically like 200 megabytes more, upward in size. And in those days, I was on 56K dial-up.
Yeah, you were doing dial-up. Like, were you the only hacker in the world who did dial-up? And you're getting 200 megabyte size files for dial-up. Like today, 200 megabytes, no big deal. But in 2001,
5 minutes per megabyte. So it would have been a hell of a download,
Yeah.
You probably couldn't even stream an MP3 at that speed, but
no, I don't think so. 56K, no, not at all. So anyway, you're keep walking us through this. This is fascinating. You encounter these raw files of 200 megabytes or so, and what do they have on them? What do they show?
Right, exactly. So I couldn't download it, so I had to look at it on the desktop. And once you make your link through your command console, then I ran a remote control desktop thing called Remotely Anywhere. It's a bit like using PC Anywhere, or a lot of people use them these days, aren't they, for logging into the office remotely.
Okay.
Your desktop. So yeah, it was a bit like that. And I couldn't download them, so I just double-clicked on one, just to see it there and then on the desktop. So I had to know instantly what was there. Could I confirm right there and then what Donna Hare was saying? And I did. And then it started to come on the screen, and it was very slow, sort of shuttering down line by line. I thought, crikey, I can't bloody wait for this. I turned the screen down, and it's still quite slow. I thought it was a bit faster.
Maddening.
And I ended up at, I think, 640 by 480 resolution.
Okay.
And then it was coming down. Okay, I was seeing it. And there was what looked like fuzzy sort of grey at first. And then there was this lightning haze. And then there was the hemisphere of the planet. Then I'm like, this is it. I found it. It's the Holy Grail. Exactly what I was looking for. All confirmed with one story. Because that's what I wanted. I didn't want to read about it or watch videos of lights in the sky. I wanted, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, proof that A, they were real, and B, that NASA or the government knew about them. So here it was, and it got about 2/3 of the way down, and there was, I assume it was the Earth. I can't believe if it was a color or monochrome, but clouds, and then this perfectly smooth shell of a craft that got to just underneath its body, and there were no rivets, no seams. There was no sign of sort of working on this thing. It was weirdly smooth, but it did have these, like the golf ball domes, the geodesic domes for communications, like radar installations, which is kind of human, above and below. And
so these were on the craft, these domes type structures.
Yeah. So obviously,
there's no possibility. I mean, I'm just having to ask this, that what you were seeing was an actual known satellite constructed by any nation? Is this something?
No, I've been into space as a child. So I was into just space in general when I was little. I had, airfix, astronauts and stuff like that. I've seen a lot of satellites, well, a lot of satellite photos, and it was nothing like that, nothing like anything.
How else could you describe this? Did you ever get a complete image of it, or did it stop in the process of?
Yeah, I got caught about just over halfway down the screen. I actually saw the mouse move over because I could see the desktop live. I saw the mouse pointer hover over the LAN icon, the local area network icon, right click it and choose disconnect. And that was me, gone. But I saw, more than half the picture.
So someone actually saw this happening and they disconnected.
Oh yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, no one's sitting at that machine, and yet the picture's coming up, and the mouse has been moving around, and they're like, "What the hell?"
So can just give us a visual again, because I really want to see this in my mind. Have you ever drawn this, by the way?
I did do a drawing for Linda Moulton Howe years ago, but I don't think I ever ended up sending it.
I'd be interested to see what it looks like.
Right, yeah, I'll do a drawing. It's very simple. It's basically a tube that's slightly fattened at the edges. Then you had the domes, and you had a dome above and below.
So you saw the top and the bottom of the tube, right? Did you see the bottom edge of it?
Yeah, it was horizontal in the sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by the time the image stopped, you had the entire elongated structure in there.
Yeah, I was just underneath.
Perfect. I see. Because from what I remembered in reviewing some of the things you talked about, you concluded that there were a certain number of these types of craft, at least I believe, but I didn't really understand how you came to that conclusion. So this is interesting, though. You're seeing you saw visually with your own eyes an image of a long cigar-shaped object, presumably with a variety of domes on the top and bottom of it.
Top and bottom and either end. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe 4 domes.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And then someone just said, "Click, we'll disconnect you."
Yeah. Man.
And I mean, you were, skeptics are out there all the time, and they're like, "Well, why didn't he do a screenshot?" But could that have even been possible?
Well, yeah, I could have just hit print screen, but it's like when these things happen, only 3 times in my life of inexplicable or incredibly exciting things happen to me.
Yeah.
And every time I didn't get a photo because I was too busy being incredibly excited, or obsessed.
Well, I assume you didn't expect to have it cut off so quickly either.
Oh no, not at all.
Right. So what else did you learn before the hammer came down on you in 2002? You saw this image, you saw an Excel spreadsheet that had a list of or had a reference to non-terrestrial officers, but you saw a few other things as well, didn't you?
Not UFO related.
Not UFO related?
No. And nothing about free energy whatsoever.
Didn't you see a list of so-called fleet-to-fleet transfers involving ships that were actually not US Navy vessels? That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's the same spreadsheet as the non-terrestrial officer spreadsheet.
Okay. So those are the 2 fundamental things. That's what I had always thought, actually.
Yeah, spreadsheet and the photo.
Just those and then the image. But thank you for describing it as well as you have. That's a really vivid description. And then You are arrested. They confiscate your computer in 2002. That's always a fun experience.
Yeah.
And you spent the next 10 years wondering if you were going to be sent to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't believe when it got that serious. They were talking about taking me over under military order number 1, which was reserved for people who blow people to bits, you know. It just got ridiculously scary, you know, it's just mad.
I just want to point out to people like that you were arrested because you were explicitly looking in for UFO related information. And I absolutely have never doubted you when you say that you found it. And to me, the proof of that is that the US government went after you at all. So what we have in your case is proof that you were able to access restricted areas of various US military sites. The US government claimed 97 sites. So, okay, fine. By the way, they mentioned that you were a little cheeky with them from time to time, letting them know about you were able to get through.
Yeah.
Off a little bit.
Well, I did once I did my search, and there was a great utility back then called Land Search, because you on the desktop you could run graphical programs, and it could search, you know, hundreds of desktops, and you told it which file type to look for, because once it's a hell of a job for one guy. You know, thousands of machines on the list, you know, and having to like identify what might be a useful file just by the file name, or you know.
Yeah.
I've forgotten where was that.
We'll just you gave them a little bit of lip, I think, at least one occasion.
Yeah. A few of the networks, they actually cherry picked apart from that note I left. But it was I didn't know back then that I had Asperger's, and I didn't recognize that as very childish behavior for a 36-year-old man. So I was 36.
Yeah.
You know. And I was filled with, you know, the liberty and the light of the mission.
Right.
I didn't see it in grown-up adult terms whatsoever. I'm still a bit like that, but I think it's a good side to have, because, you know, it makes you take risks or do things that are more interesting than life might otherwise be. But obviously sometimes it comes at a huge cost, and it did in my case.
Very interesting. So, well, I'd like to ask a little bit about the Asperger's diagnosis, because it really did become part of your story. But before we get into any of that, I feel it's important to emphasize that it seems to me that the fact that the United States military went after you as definitively as they did is, I mean, for 10 years, they just would not give up on you.
They broke the law. They broke the law.
I'm sorry, Gary. What?
Sorry about that. They broke the law as well. They took my hard drive over there and kept it even before the extradition treaty was written, and you're not allowed.
So they brought it to the U.S. Wow! Before any of that was, that's illegal.
Yeah, the last I heard of it, it was sitting in a drawer in the Office of Naval Intelligence somewhere, ONI. So,
yeah. And then, you know, the fact is that the U.S. really would never talk about the UFO connection as being significant. And indeed, this is the thing that I noticed about your case. In the very beginning, in 2002, and so when you were in the news, you were like a UFO hacker. Like, I would hear that quite a bit. And as the years went by, all of the media seemed to be dropped any reference to UFO. And you were this Pentagon hacker. So there was this concerted effort to downplay anything that you were actually looking for, so that when you get to the point of this awful Wikipedia article on you, I mean, they do recognize a little bit of UFO connection, but it's so little, it's so minimal, it's ridiculous, it's laughable. And yet, this is what happened with all of the media. And I'm sure you must have noticed that, right?
Yeah, because it was the whole reason why I was doing it in the first place. And the only publication that actually kept that up and kept saying, because of an interest in little green men, Gary McKinnon's facing XYZ. was the Daily Mail, who were running a campaign for me in the final couple of years. And
Okay.
they helped to save me, basically.
Very interesting. And actually, along those lines, I wonder if you noticed a difference in how US and UK media treated you. I mean, you really became a cause celeb in the UK after a while, and not simply because of the UFO thing. I think I get the impression that a lot of Brits just thought, "Hey, you know what? Like, why are these Americans thinking that they can just grab one of ours and put them up for trial?" So I think there was a lot of that happened. Did you get a difference in treatment from the UK media as a result of that? More sympathetic, for example, than in the US, or was there no difference in your opinion?
Yeah, there was a lot of anger in the extradition treaty itself was clearly imbalanced. You know, you guys are protected by your constitution. All power to that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have nothing really like that. We have, the Magna Carta and outdated things like that. But
it's a little old.
Court, yeah.
Early 1205, 1206.
Yeah, somewhere there.
Going back a little bit.
Yeah. But there was a big difference in media treatment. The main thing we noticed was a complete blackout in America for the first few years. They didn't want people knowing. Some stoner in his bedroom has got into the Pentagon.
I always felt the big problem from the U.S. point of view is, like, if they bring you to trial, then how do they deal with all this UFO thing? Maybe they didn't care about it. Maybe they didn't think it was important. But I always felt that it really was important and potentially quite explosive, and a kind of acknowledgement or an admission that there was genuine UFO data there. I think wasn't that always a fear? Did you ever think that this was a problem on the American side of it?
Well, absolutely, because I knew what I'd seen. I don't have the photo, unfortunately, but I knew it. So I knew they knew it, and that's why they took the hard drive illegally. I was also a couple of the machines that I was on were part of a FOSI, Air Force Office Special Investigations, I know you're familiar with. So yeah, I mean, the UFO thing must have been something to do with it, because what they tried to do in America, I think they wanted me to be called the 9/11 hacker rather than the UFO hacker. But I was hacking, all the way from, I think, basically March 2001 to 2002. So it's very, I hate when people try to use 9/11 emotionally to convince someone of something, when the actual 9/11 event and me have nothing to do with each other. But obviously there's the understanding that when a country's on high alert and you're poking your nose around in networks that you shouldn't be on.
No, exactly. And actually, when I introduced you earlier in this program, I said legendary to some people, and what I was implying was there were folks back then who, not just merely politically conservative, but UFO skeptics who I mean, I remember this, and I was so angry, but there were people who said, yes, he should be arrested and he should be imprisoned for what he did. So there were people who really did oppose you and were very much against what you did. Just like today, now you see the same thing in the U.S. over WikiLeaks, despite the fact that WikiLeaks has, I mean, a very reliable track record of putting out genuine information that I've always felt is in the public interest. But still in the U.S., there's definitely an anti-WikiLeaks attitude. And I think you were subject to that same type of attitude back in 2002 and 2003 and 2004, in those early years when this country really lost its mind in a lot of ways over 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredibly emotional time to go through, and also for an entire nation. It's a world-changing event.
Right. But you weren't a 9/11 hacker. That's absolutely the case. You were not. You had nothing to do with that. But you were poking into the U.S. System around the time of 9/11. So that's where that connection comes in.
Yeah.
How did Solar Warden get tied in with you? And can you talk about Solar Warden? Do you think it's a real program? I mean, your name's been connected to it for a long time. And for those people who may not know, it's simply an alleged name of a secret space program that run by the U.S. and probably its allies as well.
Yeah, I don't really know much about Solar Warden. Somewhat perversely, I guess, I haven't done a lot of reading on the UFO subject for years, really.
Well, I
I've read
think didn't it come out then through one of Project Camelot's witnesses? I'm trying to remember all the names of them, but I think that's where I first heard Solar Warden. And
Right.
I think you may have been somehow just, maybe they connected it to you because you gave a certain status to it. Maybe
Yeah, I
that.
think first time I saw it might have been, it was either above top secret or one of the projects, Project Camelot or Project Avalon, or someone connected.
Right. But you had
I got-
nothing to do with it. You didn't see anything to do with the Project Solar Warden.
No, not that I know of. No.
Right.
I saw lists of ships names, material transfers, fleet transfers. Solar Warden doesn't ring a bell.
I'm really glad we mentioned this because I think it's an important point to get out there and separating the truth from the myth or from inaccuracies in your story. And I've always felt it's really important for us to get to what is exactly true about the Gary McKinnon story, because frankly, what is true is powerful enough. And it's interesting because you did what you did at a time that the United States really went through a kind of revolution. I've been talking about this myself for a long time, but a national security revolution where their capabilities and their desires were much greater in terms of enforcing a global obedience, global rule than ever before. And so when they found you, you were one of the early, you were going to be one of the early sacrificial lambs, it seems to me. And you were saved by your government and the public opinion ultimately.
Yeah, and of course, unfortunately, at the same time as 9/11, hacking was a growing problem in defense networks.
Yeah, like a genuine problem. I mean, I don't want to minimize the problems that the U.S. military had to deal with in terms of hacking. Obviously, it was, but I don't think anyone really considered you a genuine national security risk. I think I always got the feeling it was very overblown.
Yeah, but I think they did want it as a sort of poster boy case for not to be a hacker.
Yeah, exactly. And you were going to be it. You nearly became it.
Yeah.
And you could have spent years and possibly even to this day. I know what I wanted to ask you actually, and I hope this isn't uncomfortable for you, but the fact is that you would
I'm already uncomfortable. It's fine.
Are you? Okay, well, good. We'll just keep going then with that. So at some point during this, you were diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, but it was significant because this was one of the very important reasons given by Home Secretary Theresa May at the time in blocking the extradition. Were you suicidal during some of this? Because that's
oh God, yeah.
Yeah, you were. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the diagnosis was pivotal, really. I mean, they did say I was what they call high functioning, sort of fairly low on the spectrum.
Yes.
And my thing really is my obsessions, especially with like justice and fairness and almost thinking as if you could solve the problems of the world.
Well, that sounds like a lot of people. So maybe it's a widespread situation or condition.
Yeah, maybe it is. I mean, I said to one guy, isn't it just a personality type? And he said, well, yes, but don't tell people that because I've written 5 books on the topic. So,
well, the fact that you were diagnosed with this, I mean, ultimately worked to your benefit in the extradition process. Obviously, it really did help you. But can you talk about the emotional stress that you went through? I mean, you were someone like for 10 years, you really didn't know if you would be sent off to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah,
how did that affect your life, your relationships, your ability to function on a daily basis?
Well, it was horrible. But yeah, I lost my girlfriend at the time, my job, then my flat. I lost my job because newspaper reporters were coming to the rear yard of the job I was working in. Lost a career in IT, so I was doing jobs like the forklift driving. which I also lost because of reporters coming to the back. But yeah, then you do not think it'll go on for 10 years. I was told, because I was perfectly prepared, because a lot of detractors say, oh, if you can't do the time, McKinnon, don't do the crime. I was perfectly prepared to do the crime that on paper it would be the result of any court case in my country.
Mm-hmm.
And the police said to him at the time, well, you probably get 6 months for unauthorized access, you didn't cause any damage, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then, it went on for a year and then 2 years. And we kept losing every hearing we lost. And we had to have a review after review and think of other points and try and find a way. And in 2008, I was at my worst, so my actual lowest. And I bought potassium chloride. I bought it in samples from multiple different outlets. Food grade potassium chloride.
Okay.
But that's the third injection, your triple lethal injection in the States.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, I bought enough so that if you poured the powder into so many liters of water and drank it, your heart would stop.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, because I know that I'm too weak to face a long jail sentence in a foreign country. In my own country, I would have tried to handle it, but not in a foreign country where you're looked upon as a terrorist and enemy of the state. No thanks.
So fortunately that you didn't get to that point, but you did purchase it, and I suppose you were prepared to use it if you were going to be extradited.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
An awful situation. I remember during those years, I personally, referred to you quite frequently in a number of my lectures and interviews. I always considered you someone who was very, very important and brave. And aside from that, the fact that you were able to gain what I feel is genuine evidence of something that we are interested in. I feel that you performed a great public service, and you were nearly going to pay a very, very grave price, but you actually did pay a price, it turns out, because of 10 years of complete disruption of your life.
Yeah, it's not the same as a jail sentence, obviously, but it's kind of a sentence in itself. And I must say, there were times during those dark years when you brightened an hour or two for me, with me watching your lectures, and especially I remember the first time being surprised to hear you mention my name in one of your lectures. I was like,
oh, really?
Yeah. So that was nice.
It's so funny, when because we've still never met in person, but we've communicated a few times now, and I didn't really know that I would ever meet you ever. So to me, you were just some distant public figure, So I'm really glad that we have the chance to chat now.
Me too.
Absolutely. This is not something that you like talking about. I realize that, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do it. It's probably bringing up painful or unpleasant memories. So I just want you to know, I very much appreciate the fact that you're willing to do this. I know that you're much more interested these days in talking about energy breakthroughs and energy solutions. And I would like people to know that you and I are going to continue that conversation for the interview on Richard Dolan Members' website. And in fact, you sent me a great deal of information in advance of that, which was quite interesting, quite impressive. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that with you. But as far as your biographical story and the significance of what you did, I realize you didn't want to talk about it. Honestly, you did it for me as a favor. And so I appreciate that a lot.
Well, I appreciate it. I've admired you for a long time. And that's part of the reason why I don't mind doing it for you.
Thank you. Have you done this? So you haven't really talked about your story much recently at all, or like in the last 5 years, have you done it many times at all?
The last 5 years? I don't think I've done it at all in the last 5 years. No.
I didn't think so either. That's why I was very pleased to be able to get you to do it this time. Because now it's been almost 20 years. We're almost pushing 2 decades.
Yep.
Do you find a lot of, what's your recognition, your name recognition in the UK? I mean, I would assume everyone in the UFO field, especially in the UK, they all know you, right?
Yeah. I went to UFO Truth magazine conference.
Mm-hmm.
run by Gary. He's going to kill me if he watches this. I've forgotten his surname.
Heseltine?
And yeah, it was there were a lot of people were like, cracky that, and then autographs and interviews, and happens in shops, happens in there's a lot of UFO enthusiasts.
Oh yeah,
because I'm not. It's not like I'm David Beckham, the football player, or anything, but it happens quite a lot.
There's been a real change in the culture in the last generation. Like you and I both kind of entered the scene around the same time. You know, you with being arrested and me with publishing my first book around the same time. And so we've been in that culture. And
can I just say, I wish I'd read that book, because I read that book in 2003. And
okay, great.
if I'd have read that before the hacking, I may have thought, actually, there's quite a lot of evidence anyway, really, from government documentation.
Oh, so I don't need to do the hacking. So that's what it would have been. Well, I'm glad you didn't read my. I don't know. I'm glad you didn't read the books that you did it, but I'm sorry that you had to go through what you did.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, though, there's been a very big change in the culture, obviously, and I think a lot of it's just generated by the web and then by social media. But the UFO field is a totally different culture than it was more than 20 years ago. It's completely different. And there are larger crowds, and some of the folks are, you know, they're almost like they're public figures, and you are one. And it's really interesting to see that transformation. Are there younger people, though, like who just don't know anything about you? Do you encounter that?
I'm sure there are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are.
I think it's really important that we had this conversation here, and that this will go on YouTube. I really think, like, for as all of the incredible significance that you've had in this field, and for how prominent your case was for so long, I'm almost afraid that there's a danger that the next generation of people coming along will kind of forget the significance of Gary McKinnon. I really wanted to do the interview with you for that reason.
Well, I'm really happy to be part of your collection of great podcasts.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled that you and I have been able to do this one.
Yeah, me too.
So maybe we can take this opportunity to wrap this up here. I almost feel bad by pushing you through this more and more, but you've actually given us more than I think people expected, and a very a good description, by the way, of how you were able to access those NASA and defense files. Again, it's not. I don't think it's really accurate to call it hacking, but you were looking for doors that were open, so to speak. And
yeah, the technical term is cracking, but it wasn't even cracking, because I was just looking for a blank password or the password. So yeah, you're right. It wasn't hacking at all. No.
Interesting. And I'm glad also that you were able to provide a reasonably good description of what you saw. And indeed, what you saw doesn't look like anything that's officially on the records as far as space fleet or spacecraft are concerned. So that's interesting. And then the information you got on the Excel spreadsheet, I think, supports that the non-terrestrial officers and the fleet-to-fleet transfers. And the other new thing that I'm not sure I heard anywhere else, I'm sure you've described it, but I just haven't seen it, is how you got to the information you did by researching the claims of Donna Hare and using that information to then go and pinpoint your search, and which allowed you to find that image that you spoke of. To me, that's actually quite significant.
Yeah, well, I thought, well, I have to, if I want to find information, these well, supposedly secure places. But I thought, yeah, you have to have a proper approach. So you have to research the target.
Right.
You do what they call PIG, passive information gathering.
Are there any issues in the UFO field that you currently follow? Are you kind of done with that? Are you focused on free energy, or do you still find yourself looking into secret space evidence and the like?
Yeah, I'm no longer into, I used to love watching videos on YouTube of UFOs, but after a while, lights in the sky, just lights in the sky, aren't they? And it's what's behind all that that's really important. Abductees, I find incredibly interesting. I've got my first John Mack book down there. I'm going to reread it again soon. Especially, I think I get a good sense of people. So when I'm watching some of these interviews, I think I make a pretty good choice as to who's telling something that for them is true.
Right.
And so some of the abductees are very convincing, especially some of the ones in the sort of 70s and 80s.
I certainly agree with you. Yes.
And the audio tape of Benny and Barney Hill under hypnosis, that's very powerful and emotional, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, you've had a lifelong interest in this, and you've carried it through your life, and you've, along the way, made a very significant contribution to the knowledge for all of us. And so I guess I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone listening, because I think you deserve it. And you deserve to know that after all of that awful 10 years of depression and struggle and even worse, that you came out of it, and hopefully you're in a good place now. And I, for one, am really glad.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you. Well, how about we wrap this part of the interview up, Gary? And is there anything? Do you have a website? Do you have a way that you have people to reach you? YouTube, right?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube and Twitter. That's the ones I really use. Yeah.
People can just search you out on YouTube and Twitter and follow you.
Yeah.
Well, Gary McKinnon, what a pleasure talking with you. And I want people to know, if you want to follow up with Gary and me, go to richarddolanmembers.com. We're going to go even further and dive into free energy. And I think this is going to be a pretty freewheeling conversation. You have a lot of information, and I definitely want, I would love for you to share that with me. But for now, Gary, I want to thank you for being on the Richard Dolan Show. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. Oh, shit. There's one thing I wanted to tell you.
Oh, okay.
I've only told this story once before. Back on, I think it was the Tim Binnall show, Binnall of America. I think it was in 2006. This was 2005, I think this happened, or 2006, I can't remember.
Okay.
And, my girlfriend and I are living in a bedsit, just a one-bedroom thing on the first floor of a building. First floor European, so one above the ground. And we went to bed, and I woke up with a really sharp pain in my left heel, like sharp enough to make me sort of jolt up in bed and lean towards my foot to see what the hell is that. And instantly, against my will, because I'm trying to find out what is causing this pain, I slumped to sleep again. I wake up in the morning, so God knows how many hours later, because it was dark when it happened. And this is one of the incidents I was referring to about not getting a photograph. On my heel were two perfectly circular holes, about 5 millimeters in diameter and about a centimeter apart. And off one of them was hanging a perfectly circular flap of skin, as if it had been like a paper punch, like a paper hole punch.
What the hell, man?
I know. I did want to get in contact with Dr. Leary, who sadly passed away now, hasn't he?
Oh, Roger Lear.
Sorry, Lear.
He died a few years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah. But
very interesting. Wow.
Completely inexplicable. Yeah.
And you were not able to get any kind of medical. What would the doctor say about it? Looks like you had a mini hole puncher in your heel.
Yeah. I mean, people have said, "Oh, a fox or a rat." I'm like, no, certainly not.
You were in bed where your foot was under the cover.
Yeah. I've gone over it with a magnetometer and all sorts, but there's no sort of weird signals coming off it.
I suppose a bug bite is someone might consider as a possibility, but those holes seem rather large.
5 millimeters. Yeah.
And quite circular, were they?
Perfectly circular, and the flap of skin was perfectly circular.
Oh my God. Okay.
That scared me.
That's a visual that I'll take with me for a while. You don't have a picture of it, I suppose, do you? Did you?
No, that's one of the incidents I was referring to when I said I was just too. What the hell?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the story, Gary. It's been absolutely wonderful, and we're gonna come right back and talk about energy breakthroughs that you are researching, and I would like to talk. This is an interest of mine as well. But for now, let's wrap it up. And I just want to say this concludes my interview with Gary McKinnon, citizen of the United Kingdom, who is, I would say, the most famous. We're going to say hacker, most famous UFO hacker in history, cracker, hacker, whatever. If you want to hear If you want to hear us continue this conversation, go to my website, richarddolanmembers.com, where we're going to go even further. Thanks for listening. And remember, while we learn and grow and search for the truth, let's be good to each other. Later.